Jason Sherman with Graphical Networks. Going to be talking about, well, what's on the screen, cables, circuits, that kind of thing. Trying to make a little more sense maybe out of your cabling in your environment. That can mean different things to, I guess, the person in charge of the cabling. It might be what we refer to as inside plant. It might be cables in a data center in a wiring closet, or it might be outside where you're talking about tracking cables and strands, more fiber type lines that are running between buildings through vaults, manholes, pits, things like that, conduits and duct banks and so on. So we kind of have solutions in all those different areas. Just give you a general overview what we'll be talking about, and then give you a quick little demo. If you have any questions, just let us know. You can shoot us an email. Use my email, Jason at Graphical Networks, or Fred.co at Graphical Networks, either one, or just call us up, get on the website, find us. There's some information out there on our site as well. It's probably how you found us in the first place. So, yeah, see if we might have the right fit for you or not, based on what you might be looking for. So, see if I can get PowerPoint here to do its thing. Oh, look at that. So, we often come across Visio and Spreadsheets, sort of a big thing for us, and this is moving fast. I think I hit the wrong button in my sheets here, so let me see if I can page up and go back to where we were. Hold on, bear with me. I'm not a PowerPoint expert by any stretch. So one of the things we talk about, of course, are how are you managing things today, right? Is it Visio, Spreadsheets, and so on? Those things are pretty inefficient. Here, I'm going to just escape out of here, and I'll bring up the sheet this way. Good old manual effort here. So Visio and Spreadsheets, that's pretty common for folks that come and talk to us. Spreadsheets are a big one. Visio, to a certain extent, not as much for cables usually, because that gets pretty tedious. But spreadsheets are very big. And it's tough. If you've got a big environment, and a small environment, spreadsheets can be fine, can be a good solution. But as you grow and, obviously get bigger and have more things to manage, spreadsheets can be pretty cumbersome. Plus, they're not as efficient to share, really, as far as, multi-users putting in data, reading, and so on. It's just not quite as efficient. So anyway. Hidden costs, inefficiencies. Probably don't have to tell you a lot of this stuff, but a big one's just troubleshooting, trying to figure out problems and issues. What's the cost related to that and downtime? It could be buying things you don't need, knowing where to put things, capacity planning, and so on. The other one is just knowing if you have capacity from the standpoint of like a circuit path. Do I have strands available? Or maybe I think I have strands, but really, in fact, they should have been marked as unusable in certain areas and things like that. So it's those types of things. It's just having good information at your disposal to make decisions throughout the day, right? The goal is to do the job and hopefully get out on time of the office so you can go do other things. So that's what we're certainly hoping to help you guys do. So that's where we come in, our software product, netTerrain, helping with copper, fiber, sort of tray management, power too, and that's something else to think about, where are things connected, how are they connected, and so on. So that's another area that you might get into. So it's a pretty short PowerPoint here. We'll just get into showing you a little bit of information in the software. So let me bring up my browser here so you guys all see that. So I've got my little Acme network on the screen. So netTerrain's a browser-based tool. We do a SaaS thing, or you can get software and install it internally. Basically, you do most of your work through the browser, though. It's a drag and drop. You grab an object, and drag it in, kind of thing, from the catalog and so on. So it's pretty easy to get started and build hierarchies and so on. There's a lot of features, functionality, and power in the tool too. So when you want to get more detailed, more granular reporting and various other things, the capabilities are there. But at the same time, we try and keep it somewhat easy to use. But with that said, you can build hierarchies. So for instance, I can double click and drill down into a certain location or area, and double click and drill down and kind of keep going into different areas, depending on what it is you're ultimately trying to do. And that might include going down to a data center type view or room or layer where you're navigating to various cabinets and equipment. It might be where you need to go into equipment and actually see devices, or the cabinet level view. Let me just jump up a layer here, where you actually see, like here, you see the actual cabinet with the equipment, and then from there you can start to dictate the connectivity and so on. You can show PDUs, rack mounted, or in this case, on the side, so to speak, of what's inside. So, but you drill down into levels and you get these elevations, and ultimately you're going to get down to seeing the ports and seeing connectivity, right? I mean, that's kind of what the name of the game is when you're managing cables. It's really what is connected to what, and how do I see that information. So for us, it really comes down to connecting objects together with a link. So you can imagine you're standing in a data center or in your wiring closet. You're looking at something that's got cables coming out of it, sort of going everywhere, but you're not really sure where those cables go. So if you're documenting it, you have a port on an object. You've got data about the port, perhaps, and then you see a cable. In this case, sort of coming out, and it's going somewhere. In this case, it's going to this yellow port-looking thing. That's really the connection where you're connected to. If you double-click on this, it'll take you to, in this case, to a patch panel. And then this would be the cable that runs between them. And that cable is defined by you. It could be, in this case, it's an Ethernet cable, but it could just as easily have been fiber or power or whatever, depending on the connections and type. Like here, I've got a power-type connection. So we get, at this point, we get into managing those connections and understanding how things are connected to each other. And ultimately, you sort of hope to get into the point where you can generate a view from this data to give you maybe a path view. So I can see, okay, well, I know what's connected to where's that sort of that first hop, but in this case, the drawing's going to show, what's the physical path view at that point from end to end. It does a jump, then I got another hop. So here we're looking at what we refer to as really the swim lane view, where you're showing hierarchy versus physical path. So sort of pointing at the cable I just came from. But if you look from the top down, where you go physical, you've got a site, you've got a building, floor, the rack, the piece of equipment that's in the rack, and then the port that's part of the equipment. So that's hierarchy. So again, back to that example of I'm standing in front of the device, I'm standing in front of and looking at the cable, and I go, where's this go? Well, this is telling you where it goes. It goes to the next patch panel, and that patch panel in turn connects to another one and another, and then ultimately it terminates somewhere. In this case, terminates to port one of, this is actually a card inside a device. I can click and view and see, all the different information here. But, what's the purpose of this? Again, the purposes might be to help you troubleshoot. It might be to understand if there is what is the path? Maybe you're going to define sort of a service or a circuit path or something along those lines. So, again, helping to manage the infrastructure a little more efficiently than just a spreadsheet. Now, one of the questions always, well, okay, how do I get data into the system? This is great, but it looks like a lot of work. Well, you can manually create things, but that's not ideal, especially if you have data that you have already that's trusted, like an Excel spreadsheet set of data. Okay, I've got good data. It's not as efficient. I'd like to put in a system maybe that's a little easier for me to use. And you go through the process of maybe importing it from Excel. There's other ways to bring in data, APIs, and connections to data sources, databases, tables, views, and other things. But those are more of a discussion point when you're looking at these different tools, and you talk to the vendors about how do I get existing data into the system, because they may vary depending on the vendor, and one might be a better option than another, and so on. So with all this, you can also you create these diagrams, this hierarchy of information, and so on. And it doesn't have to be just about data centers or wiring closet. It might also be about connectivity outside of those areas. I mentioned outside plant. It might be something like I need to track connections into a floor plan, into a wall jack, into a building, into a room, that kind of thing. It's showing something like a wall jack. And where does that wall jack go to? Which port on the switch or the patch panel am I connected to when I'm inside a room? And in some cases, that doesn't matter to a lot of folks. In other cases, it's critical to business for various reasons, security being one, might be troubleshooting, and, kind of depends on the industry too. In some cases, it's really not a requirement to track to this level. In others, it might be. It might be healthcare, or when you're talking financial service industry, you might really need a lot of detail and get into the information down to wall jacks and port level detail and things like that. So, and being able to track back and see that information is always a nice thing. But the information you put in, it's in the case of our tool, it's really kind of up to you. You can put in these backgrounds and pictures and decide what the hierarchy is going to be. Is it going to be rooms and buildings and floors like I have here with floor plans? Or it might be more generic, maybe it's just a few wiring closets or something more critical that you really need to focus on, and that's fine. You get to, and you choose to decide that. That's up to you. So this, again, sort of more inside. If you want to talk more like an outside type thing, then we look at more outside plant. I want to show things like buildings, and I want to show ducts or duct banks, and I need to understand the conduit that's in the duct banks, so I can go over here to the left and actually see what's inside this duct bank. In this case, what's the conduit that's in here? I've got one piece of conduit in this duct bank. Great. What does that look like from the standpoint of what's inside of that? So I can create these nested relationships of cables, because cabling is not just, a fiber or a copper. It might be pathways. How are things running in the environment, if that's, of course, important to what you're trying to do. In some cases, I have a lot of customers, it's not. It's only certain things matter. But when you are doing outside plant, this is usually kind of key and critical, because I might need to go and look at, I've got 4 cables in this conduit. I need to focus on a specific one. I want to know what the endpoints for this particular cable are. In other words, this cable's fiber cable. It's got a number of strands. Where do those strands connect to? Where does the cable terminate? Does it terminate into a splice box? Does it terminate inside a building? And so on. That's what this is showing. Got a cable. I can bring up the interface for the strands. I can bring up the interface to connect the strands if I want to actually create the strand endpoints, right? So I can go in and say, port strand 1 is connected to port 9F and port 9 of these different devices, and go through the process of connecting all the strands up. So the strands are inside the cable, cables associated with the conduit with the duct bank, and so on. Again, level of detail is really up to you and what you're trying to accomplish. You only want to do what you're really tasked or set out to do, and what's going to solve whatever pain that you might have. So this, in this case, maybe you don't need outside plant, which would be fine. You just focus on, the task at hand, so to speak. So with all that said, again, how do you start a project to do sort of cable management? What are your options? I mean, these are things you think of when you go to look at different vendors and what they offer. Ease of use. How do I bring my data in? Is there reporting mechanisms? How about users? Are there different levels of permissions? Those types of things. So those are things you'll think about when you go out and start to look at a tool like ours, if you are looking for a cable management type system. for a bit. If you have any questions, by all means, post. I'll give you a minute to post something in the chat or the question window, and I'll look for any questions that are out there. And, you know, like I said, if there's any other questions you guys have, just follow up and ping us. We can have a more extensive demo or answer questions you guys have. There's a site you can go to if you just want to sign up and play around, test out the software a little bit. But you know, you want to make sure it's the right fit, our product or any product for that matter, it's the right fit and the right time and so on. So let's see here. I got some questions. Catalog question. How big is the catalog? Does it contain Corning devices? Yeah, I mean, we've got a pretty extensive catalog. We have different object types, nodes, links, racks. Racks are something you can choose to use or not use, but racks and then devices. And it's pretty extensive. I mean, it's probably 10, 15,000 objects. I don't even know what the count is anymore. But the nice thing about our catalog is it's very flexible. You can create your own objects in it. You don't need us to do that for you. You know how to do it. You just go in there and do it. Press a button, add new, go through the process, and you're good to go. But as a customer, you can request objects from us too. I need a new Cisco widget. I need a new Corning XYZ that just got released. You open a ticket, request it, and we send it back to you. You know, typically it's almost next day. I think I've been averaging, but usually we say 1 to 2 days for a standard request, but pretty fast. Color code links, say one splice goes to police, another goes to, yeah, I mean, so that gets into a lot of feature stuff with these things called visual overrides where you can set up different colors, different color links. You can have a link or an object change appearance based on a piece of data. So maybe it's a status field that says, up, you make it green, down, you make it red, and maybe you have a customer field where if the customer is X, make this path or this link a certain color or style. So there's a lot of functionality in there about that. Support copper and fiber cabling. We support any kind of cable you want to put in. You can create your own link types. So you can do cables with fiber strands built in. You can just do cables in general, links in general, and call them whatever you want. You want to call it fiber 50 micrometer single mode XYZ, create it. We don't keep you from doing that and using that. So it's pretty flexible from that standpoint. And power too. I have a lot of customers that track power, PDUs, back to even the breaker boxes, right? They need to know, hey, what's this rack, which breaker box panels is it on, which, if the circuit gets tripped, what's going to be impacted, and so on. Does netTerrain discover link connections too? netTerrain can. We've got something called the collector, and you can set it up to go out and do an SNMP discovery of devices, and that'll discover CDP, LLDP, MAC information, and so on. We assemble that into connectivity between devices. So in some cases that's very useful for people, and others it's not as critical. And the SNMP also is nice because outside of links and standard SNMP stuff, you can also get other values. So I have some customers using it just as a means of pulling data points from like PDUs. I want to know what the last value was on this PDU as far as like a power reading or something. So watts, voltage, whatever it might be. So those are the types of things you can get into as well, depending on the equipment. But most things support SNMP and allow you to put an OID in and grab a piece of data from the device. So it's kind of nice. netTerrain links, Excel spreadsheets. So that goes along with importing. You have different import mechanisms. You can do things like Excel import. Our collector allows you to do imports. It can do discovery, and it's got what we call connectors to external systems. Like, you might have SolarWinds or something you want to pull data from and use it in netTerrain. You can do those types of things too. So the Excel import's very powerful in that you can really build all your documentation using a spreadsheet, import it, builds hierarchy, physical locations, rack mounts, devices, creates the objects, creates links, and so on. So if you do have data and it's good data, a lot of times the Excel spreadsheet's a good way to get that data in. So any other questions? Let's see anything else. But again, if you've got questions, let us know, or hit up our website, shoot us an email. Again, we can have a more extensive, elaborate sort of demo and talk about your maybe specific requirements, see if the tool's the right fit or not. So I don't see anything else, so I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it. If anything comes up, just let us know. Oh, there was one last thing there. It said, is it cloud-based? Either way, you can do cloud. We have a SaaS offering, or you can do non-SaaS, so you can just host it yourself if you want to. We can send you requirements docs and talk to you about all that. It's pretty, doesn't need a really powerful platform to run on, so it's pretty easy to get up and running. So, all right, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time.